I know, right? So, all right, I think that's going to be pretty much everybody for this evening. So let's get this meeting of the Budget Committee for Thursday, December 14th started. And if we could just first stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Couple quick things. The Sue Levinson is out this evening for family matters, so we hope everything goes well there, which it should. And the big one is Suzanne Eden has resigned from the Budget Committee due to work and family obligations. So we wish her well, and that seat is now open. So anybody has any ideas on who would want to fill that or can get the word out, please do, and we'll try to get that filled as quickly as possible. So, all right. The next thing I'd like to do is make sure that we do introductions. So, Aaron, if you would start.
Aaron Masqua.
Peter White.
Michael Keister.
Mishka Haddock, Chair.
Les Thompson.
Carol Martin.
Jen Byron.
Carol Lee.
Scott Brennan.
Jackie Snow.
Marjorie Whitmore.
Bob Godomsky.
Chris Souza.
Jude Shelbat. All right, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here tonight to review the second draft of the school budget and current financials. I'll let you guys roll with it.
All right. You want to start?
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Sherbet is here. He's our curriculum director. He hasn't joined us before, but given the nature of some of your questions, we thought it'd be nice to have him here this evening. So welcome, Mr. Sherbet. And in a moment, Dr. Gomsky will walk you through the packet of new material and also go through the changes, and we'll discuss the budget in detail and answer your questions. As we do go through the discussion tonight, keep in mind one thing you probably noticed when you received the information: the default budget that you saw is probably higher than you've experienced or seen in the past. So that's one of the struggle or challenges we're faced with. There's a lot of contractual and required obligations that are quite high this year, which then leaves little headroom for maybe strategic investments or discretionary type of expenditures, things we'd like to do to improve the school. As we go through, the budget will point out these things, but some things that came to my attention as I analyzed the budget was our high school is an area where you probably saw some growth. Please do not think that the tuition went up 25% or whatever that number is. We are actually seeing more high schoolers because of our class enrollments, and larger classes are moving through the high school. And also we're seeing that more children in the past are choosing Hill Brown. Some quick numbers I ran: there's anywhere from 13 to 18 more students that we're budgeting for high school next year compared to this year, and about 25 more students are projected to choose Hill Brown versus Dover. So that's why you're seeing some of those cost fluctuations. You might have seen special ed went up a bit more than in the past. There are some savings in other areas of the budget. You'll see special ed could be a little bit higher. And then transportation as well. This is the last year of our 3-year contract with Dale Transportation. We did receive 2 bids back, and both of those are higher than anticipated, more than a 3% increase, which is what we had the last 3 years with Dale Transportation. So those are kind of some of the sunk costs that you'll see. And with the budget of our size, a 1% increase is about $120,000 increase in expenditures. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through it, and we'll certainly point out the more strategic investments we still kept in the proposed budget. But over the last, few weeks or so, the board's met many times. We've been very thoughtful to try to get a budget out there that's still a good investment in the school, but is not too high or too excessive. A difficult challenge given where the default budget stands at this time. So Dr. Godomsky, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. With that, I'll take you through page by page and just identify some of the increases and decreases since last time in the budget. But before I do that, I gave you a stack of papers, and I'll just go through on what those are exactly. The first section is the proposed budget, and that's what we'll be going through in a moment, page by page. The second is the default budget, and the next paperclip is the estimated revenues and the estimated tax impact. The next one is the revenue statement and the monthly financials, the current monthly financials. Then you have your warrant articles. After that, you have your SAU and your preschool budgets. And finally, the district staff and salaries and benefits attached to that. So we got those ready for you, and you can put those in your 3-ring binder so it's a little more organized, I hope, and I will take you through the proposed budget. Any questions on any of that before I start? Okay, I know we went through this in detail last time, so what I'd like to do is just highlight the changes that we've had since the last time. And again, as I go page by page, if there's any questions you have, please jump in, and anybody up here at the table as well, if you've got additional information on any of these pages, please jump in. On page 1, to start off, you'll see that the teacher salary line, we have decreased that by $91,894 since last time. Coming out of there is a math specialist and a world language teacher. So both of those have come out of the budget. We just felt that although both of those positions are needed, it wasn't the right time. As Jackie said, we've got some challenges with the default budget already being increased with contractual obligations. So we thought that we would take those two out.
Can I stop you?
Yes.
I think some people are confused because he said a decrease. So what he's referring to is if you look at this handout right here, which is on top of your budget, from the first time that you received it, and now it's the second time you received it, so it's not that you're going to see it on the budget itself.
Right.
That's what we've done since you last saw the budget that we presented.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm identifying the decrease from the last budget we presented you. So just to make that clear as I go through this.
I just have a version question though, because the one that I had in my binder had regular teacher salaries at $2,240,000, but this summary says $2,265,000 from 11/15.
The one that,
The totals are different
the
too.
one that we just handed out is the one that we're going by.
Okay.
Right,
I guess we-
but she's saying that the budget packet from 11/15/17 that's listed on this list was $2,265,000, whereas,
Our version was
Yeah.
November
then our,
3rd.
this is, wait a minute, but this is budget in, this is 11/3, so there was an adjustment made between 11/3 and 11/15.
There's been a number of adjustments made
Okay.
along the way, so.
So maybe we just don't have that 11/15
Right,
version, but that's okay.
okay.
Yeah.
The
My
other,
apologies, I thought I took it from the previous budget that you last saw. It might have been a board one.
Might have been our budget.
Right.
Right,
So it is. So the board, so the last time you guys saw the school budget was November 9, and that would have been the budget from the prior Friday. So
11/3.
whatever date that is, count back 5 days.
okay, so
Right.
we've made some adjustments after that meeting.
So so you guys got it on that date in November, early November. The board has continued to, the school board has continued to review those changes and has had to make 2 additional sets of budgets, proposed budgets, that you guys have not seen.
Okay.
So-
that clears that up. Thank you.
But I'll try to identify the lines anyway, and again, if you have any questions, jump in. The world language teacher, the board has decided to include that as a warrant article. So you'll see that when we get to the warrant articles, you'll see that on there as well. Any other questions or comments on page 1? On page 2, obviously there are a number of changes because of the world language coming out and the math specialist coming out. A number of changes on the health insurance, dental, FICA, all of those things were adjusted accordingly with the reduction in those 2 positions.
Oh, Dr. Johnski, I know there are questions regarding full-day kindergarten. I'm not sure if Sue answered those at the last meeting, if we wanted Mr. Trevette to speak to any of that. There's a question about families who may not want to have their students attend full-day. Just some of the outcomes of full-day kindergarten. Are folks good with that, or would you want Mr. Trevette to speak to any of that this evening?
Yeah, wherever it falls in and is pertinent to the budget where we're reviewing it, that would be great.
I think that is page
Yeah.
1, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, full-day kindergarten would fall under the teacher salaries, so whatever questions you have.
Do folks want to restate those, or is there something different to ask, or? I think, Mr. Trevette, it was, if families may not wish to have their students attend full-day kindergarten, what the options might be for those families, and just maybe some of the academic benefits as well.
Do you want to handle the first part, the Sure. Half versus full, because you dealt with that.
So as we begin presenting full-day kindergarten out there to parents, we had a few small groups, conversations, the coffee conversations that we have, and it's a large group board, community forums around it. It was evident that we want to make sure whatever we propose allows some flexibility for parents to understand the benefits of both, a half day, because some of them had voiced, well, I would really like to be home with my child in the afternoon or in the morning. So what we're proposing is, at least in the first year, and we'll see where it goes from there, and is to have our curriculum be divided into at least enough to allow for parents and students to attend a half day. So while we're eliminating that half day bus, parents would have to transport their child, they can have that option. We'll try and scaffold the curriculum so that those students attending that half day, say in the morning, will have a similar curriculum to what they have now for a half day. Understanding, of course, that the reason why we're going to full day is because we don't believe the half day curriculum now is enough to prepare students for the future. So our curriculum will be much richer for those students who stay deeper, but we want to respect the parents who are choosing to go only half day. Our research has told us that other schools that have done this within the first year, sometimes within that first year, or just soon after that first year, all the parents have chosen the full day option. I think that until people understand what it's about, that it's not just, skill and drill all day long for kindergarten kids, and they begin to understand it, that they choose that.
Yeah, and so the learning expectations can be very different in a full-day program. One of the reasons that we would like to see that is the amount of time for socializing and play. Because right now, for 5-year-olds, they need that. That's an important part of kindergarten, their ability to actually learn to socialize and learn to resolve their problems. And it's pretty rushed right now, because we have 2.5 hours to get all of our curriculum in. The curriculum that we have, the Common Core requirements for kindergarten curriculum, requires a full-day program. So basically, by editing what we're teaching in a half-day program, we're losing part of what we're expected to be teaching. So right off the bat, kids are going into first grade a little bit behind the expectations according to the state mandated curriculum. So that's one of the important improvements. We'd like to be able to develop more hands-on projects. I mean, for 5-year-olds, that's critical. They need to explore, but exploring and hands-on stuff takes a lot of time. And so a lot of that ends up being cut out now, the science activities, the social studies activities, because we just don't have enough hours in the day. So overall, in the full day program, we hope that it would be a more natural kind of flow, more breaks in the day, more time for socializing, activities not being rushed. And hopefully all of those pieces will allow us to satisfy the curriculum, but do it in a more human way. Not that we're being inhuman, don't get me wrong. But I think the reality is, if you talk to either of the teachers, they'll tell you, fitting everything in is a nightmare. And we still try to put in some recess time on occasion for these kids, but it's really not as much as we would love to have them see, and for them to be comfortable with.
Excuse me, is there time for a nap in there?
There is not. There is not.
Used to be.
Used to be, yeah.
And that's when kindergarten was a child's first entry into school. And now the bulk of our kids coming have been in daycare. They've been in preschools since sometimes 6 months old. So kindergarten is no longer first entry for students. And we don't see, the most crying we see on the first day of school is from the parents.
A quick question. When you talk about a combination of a full day, half day, and I'm supportive of trying to accommodate like that, but I'm just wondering if it sounds tremendously challenging to design the curriculum such that there's continuity for both the full day people and the half day people into the next day and the next day, or are there going to be places where you're feeling like something went on yesterday that I didn't get to because I was only here for half a day?
Yeah, and that will be the challenge we face as we clearly articulate what the curriculum is going to be like. Our fear is that there's some truth to that. And again, our goal is to build a full day program because all the resources we have, all the guidelines we have from the state, national research as well, all point to full day skills. So we'll do our best to patch that into a half day program. We can also provide supplemental materials to parents as well to help support them when they do go home, to try and bridge that as much as possible. But there's no easy answer other than come full day.
Do your best, yeah.
There will definitely be things that a half-day child will miss, and parents will come to understand that pretty quickly.
So you're gonna have one teacher teaching a full day class and then the other teacher doing 2 half days? Am I missing something?
No, it'd be
I'm sorry.
2 full-day programs,
Okay.
and then students would just leave midday,
Oh, okay.
If their parents want them to.
if they chose
Or
to.
if they choose to.
Okay, so we are doing full day
Oh, yes.
and then optional. Okay.
Yeah, and the half-day mark is not something we would advocate for, as far as education goes, but certainly we understand and we like parents to have choices. And if that's something that they choose to for now, and that they think is best for their family, we'll work to accommodate that.
In most cases, it's the students that bug their parents saying, I don't want to go home, I want to stay with my friends for the rest of the day. And when parents realize that, the child can handle it.
Yeah, we had feedback from well over 30 schools with kindergarten throughout the state, and they all said the same thing, that once you start putting it in place, after the first year, everyone went full-time.
I just had a question about the 2 paras. Is that 2 additional paras on top for kindergarten on top of what you have now, or do you already have 2 full paras?
Correct, we don't have any dedicated kindergarten paraprofessionals. Our paraprofessionals, other than specialty para, we have 1 regular resident library aide. All the other paraprofessionals are linked to special ed students and specific programs. So these 2 will be dedicated to kindergarten, which is very commonplace around the state, around kindergarten programs.
It's the first district I've ever been in that doesn't have dedicated regular ed aides for kindergarten. But understand, right now, we have 4 sections that we divvy the kids into. This would only be 2 sections, which means the class size will go up. So having that extra hand in there. Spend the day with a room full of 18 5-year-olds, and it makes perfect sense after.
So you might actually end up with more than 1 para if there's also a special ed para in addition.
And that's possible, right? Absolutely possible.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, like I was saying, on page 2, you've got all of your appropriate benefits. The lines were adjusted to coincide with those 2 reduction of positions. At the bottom of page 2, general supplies, we did make some minor adjustments to that along the way, trying to, again, pare down where we can and still be reasonable about what we need. So there was a minor adjustment to the general supplies line. Anything on page 2? Page 3, there really were not any adjustments on those. You've got your supplies, art, language arts, reading, science, etc. Questions or additions on page 3? On page 4, I'll take you down to classroom textbooks, and that line has been adjusted. Originally, we had $9,000 in there. We took $8,000 out. That's the world language program that we originally had, so that, in addition to the teaching position, is part of the warrant article that we're going to present. So that line's down to $1,000 for textbooks, and again, we're moving $8,000 out of that. That's the only adjustment on page 4. Any questions on page 4? Page 5. I'll take you 2/3 of the way down the page. Special education tuition preschool. Our preschool is a SAU-wide preschool. That budget is established by the joint school board, and that was established a couple weeks ago. And that figure of 173,097, that is an actual number now instead of, we put a marker in there before, but that's the actual year portion of that preschool. I believe we had some questions and other information on preschool as well.
There was a question last time, although I wasn't here, about the formula for calculating the cost. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I took my calculated spreadsheet and tried to simplify it.
Thank you.
Pass this out and just tell you how we do it.
Do you know how many students from Nottingham go to the preschool?
I do. That's my next question to address.
Thank you.
So I'll answer the easy question first, was the second question is how many students go to the preschool from Nottingham? Before I start, that's not an easy question because other than, what's different about preschool than school age is it's based on age. So when a student turns 2.5, if they're special ed, they're what's called an early supports and services transfer at age 3. So it's a rolling census based on birthday. So currently in Nottingham, you have 14 special ed students, and you have 13 typicals, with one more typical scheduled to start in January. The total for the preschool is 27 identified students and 40 typical peers. So you represent a fair amount of the preschool. If you go back to the spreadsheet, I took some numbers out because they don't matter to make it easier for you. But one of the things that we discovered when we started in the SAU 5 years ago now was that if we budgeted by year, there could be huge spikes and valleys in your budget. So we adopted a 3-year cost averaging formula, and basically column B determines the 3-year average. So what I do is remove every year, the 3rd year, and add the new year, and then come up with the average. And down bottom, if you see the special ed, you'll see Northwood had 13.67, Nottingham 15.67, and Stratford 8.67. And then if you follow the column over, that determines your percentage of the preschool operating budget for that year. What confuses people sometimes is that doesn't mean that's your current enrollment. That's how I use it to budget, to remove your peaks and valleys from your budget over time.
And why is it based on just the special ed numbers instead of the total
Because we're
enrollment?
required by law to have a special education preschool, and the typicals actually pay tuition. So in your revenue lines, you have a
Gotcha.
Northwood revenue, a Nottingham revenue, and a Stratford revenue. And so it doesn't make sense because, plus we have scholarship kids based on income. So it doesn't make sense to base your cost off of that because it would be very difficult to do, number one, and you have to have that special ed preschool. So those identified students, since you're required to do that, it makes sense to budget off of that. And then try to achieve 50% typical, 50% identified population for learning. So you'll see those numbers just to warn you again, right now, 14, 13, 14, 14, as time goes on. In June, the census is very different than what it is in September, just based on birthdays. So there was another question about, will there be an increased cost to Nottingham special ed budget as students transition to Nottingham? So as part of our standard process, I look at the 8th grade, and I look at all the paraprofessional support. That's generally the cost. You've already got your existing teachers and your special education teachers and your related services providers. Your paraprofessional costs are the ones that can swing. So in standard budgeting, we look at 8th grade leaving and know that we're gonna have that much time available. And then I know what I have coming in, and then we make pretty much an educated guess on what our needs are gonna be. And generally, those parent numbers remain the same because the population coming in, about the population that exists. So, and you will have potentially some special education paras in the kindergarten next year, just like you do this year, based on those calculations. So, does that answer all the questions?
I think so.
Anything else on page 5? All right, page 6. Just really a couple of minor adjustments that we've discussed. Special education software, elementary, there's an additional piece of software that we needed, so that was just increasing that line to $612. And then down the bottom in co-curriculars, there was an additional $1,100 put in that line of $14,600 down there. And It was for the addition of, I believe, a computer club that's been operating that it has been very successful, and we're putting that in the budget for next year. Questions on page 6? On page 7, I don't believe we had any adjustments on page 7, just an added number of details down there. The athletic salaries, there was some question last time about what does that include, so we added much more detail to that to help people out and just better understand where that total comes from. Anything on 7? Page 8 continues your athletics, moves into your guidance area, and we really had no adjustments on page 8. Questions or comments on page 8? On page 9, at the top you've got guidance enrichment. We had a discussion about that, and we originally had increased that line to $5,000, talked about assemblies and things. Again, we went back through the budget and we started looking at things that we might make some adjustments, possibly use some rural education grant money if we need to, but we reduced that line down to $3,000. And those are the adjustments for page 9. Questions on 9? And as we move through the meat of the budget here, there were a number of pages where there were no adjustments, but there, as you go later in the budget, you'll see some rather large adjustments that we've made. So in page 10, you've got your contracted services, speech services. Nothing on page 10 to report.
So there was compare the cost of OT as an employee and contracted service and the rationale for proceeding as a contracted service. Is that a question that we have? So that contracted services is actually out of the SAU office, not from like Stratford Learning Center. So that employee has been with the SAU since 2006. And what we know is that for our occupational therapists and our speech therapists, they're very, very difficult positions to fill with people who are just entering the career or experience. I can tell you in another district right now, they had a speech position, and they actually had to go and contract with a pretty costly service because we couldn't fill a position because there aren't the employees. So one of the reasons that we have a couple of positions in the SAU is because we can move those from the collective bargaining agreement and offer a regionally competitive wage to attract and retain staff. Your occupational therapist is one of those positions. But I did pull this year's information, just salary information. What would happen if the occupational therapist was a Nottingham employee? As an SAU employee, the salary, and also the number you see in the contracted services includes retirement, FICA, health insurance benefits, all the benefits. That's not the salary that you see, that's the total cost. So in looking at 17-18 salary data, if the employee was an SAU employee, which the employee is, the pay would be $61,000 roughly. If we shifted to a Nottingham employee, it would be $58,000. So it's really pretty marginal to, I don't want to disrupt somebody's life and career, for one thing, and plus it gives me the ability, just like we have a speech path in another district who's there full-time, as student needs go up and down, it allows me to pull and adjust and build the district that becomes liable for the service. So it's that.
So you're saying she works full-time
Right
now for
she's in
Nottingham?
full-time. Yeah, for the last 2 years, she's been in Nottingham full-time because that's where the need is.
Right.
Just like I have a speech path who's in Northwood full-time because that's where the need is. But those things flex based on maternity leaves and student needs and vacancies.
So she could, if she wasn't needed full-time by
Right, if
us,
there was not
she
a
would go
need-
somewhere
Right,
else.
if we needed 4.5 days in Nottingham and a half day somewhere else, that money would show up as a savings in the budget because we wouldn't be voting for it. I did another comparison for you, just to let you know that if I contracted the service through Stratford Learning Center as a member, I think I provided information about the cost difference between a member and a non-member. The cost of the employee would be $94,377.80. So I did that for you too.
And those are both loaded costs?
You mean based on student, yeah,
No,
mandated cost?
no, loaded meaning all the benefits and
Yeah, it's everything,
Yeah,
right,
okay.
that's your retirement contribution, that's,
comparing apples to apples.
yeah, it's a bill back through the SAU.
And that's helpful, because I thought this was an outside contract. I didn't realize it was a contract with the SAU, so
Yeah,
that's very helpful context.
And then while we're on that, I think there was a question about ESOL services and the increase in ESOL services and who provides that. Is that accurate? Yeah. So your ESL services are provided by Stratford Learning Center. And so if I can explain ESL services, because often in our small towns, it's something we experience every day. So when a student comes into the district and there's a home language survey that indicates that there's another language spoken in the home, we have a screening done by the teacher, the ESOL teacher, and that screening, actually, the scores are given in writing, reading, and speaking. And those scores range from 1 through 6. And then those scores prescribed from the state based on what those scores are determined service hours. Like anything above a 5 requires no service, just testing each year. But like anything, a 4 is 1 to 3 hours, a 3 is 3 to 6 hours. And so what I do is I take the score and then calculate what the cost will be to service that student in the next year. So if the ESOL population remains static, what you'll see over years is hopefully is as language is acquired, those scores go up and those services drop over time.
How many years do you typically see that service being used?
We still test kids at the high school level, but we rarely offer service at the high school level. So, depending, I mean, the other piece is we don't have a lot of ESOL kids in the 3 towns. So collecting that data is a little difficult, but I can tell you that the earlier we start, the greater the language acquisition is.
Okay.
So you
So
can
it
see
could
those
be
services
1 year.
drop to 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, depending on age and how strong the native language is in the home and how strong it's used.
Okay.
Exposure.
Makes sense.
Anything else on page 10? Page 11 moves into your improvement in instruction, curriculum development, course reimbursement. No adjustments on page 11. Any questions? Improvement in instruction continues on page 12. Also has the beginning of the curriculum director, high school liaison position. No adjustments were made on page 12. Questions? Page 13 continues your curriculum director, moves into your library media. There's a number of changes on the next page, but we don't have any on 13. Any questions on page 13?
Just a quick one on the library health insurance. Why does that go up so much if the rest of the staff went down?
If you'll notice, we did not budget for a health insurance buyout. So there's somebody in that section that is now opting to take the health insurance buyout and is now taking an insurance plan.
You'll notice in some of the areas that the overall insurance decreased by 2.4%, our rates did. But you'll notice jumps up or down whether a person takes the buyout, a single, 2-person, or family plan. They have the option to take any of those. So you'll see some fluctuation in the lines depending on the staff that are in there and their life changes.
So when you buy out, you pay them not to take it?
Correct.
Yep. They could have, an insurance plan through their spouse, And a lot of people during the year, sometimes their spouse's plans change or anything in their life can change. In our district, we have open enrollment in June, so anybody at that point can change whichever, their spouse might say, okay, you know what, we're gonna offer you $10,000 to take the health insurance buyout, so for them, it's better to take that buyout and then come on our insurance plan. So there's little things like that that happen throughout the year, so any life-changing event, they can change any time during the year, but we do have open enrollment in June.
So if their spouse has health insurance automatically, it's like a bonus, the buyout, right?
Right.
And is that part of the collective bargaining agreement?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it was approved, what, 2 years
Bad
ago by the
deal.
voters?
Yes.
I
In the
think,
second year.
in essence, since they're not taking insurance, it does save in some way.
Yeah, it
saves
saves
costs
the
overall,
district
yes.
because a family plan is cost somewhere in the vicinity of $25,000 to $28,000. And a two-person is less, a single is less, and then a buyout is less than that. So, you know, if somebody chooses to take the buyout and they've already got insurance through their spouse, it's a benefit to them and it's a benefit to the district.
Sorry, and which insurance company do you work with?
We deal with Health Trust.
Any other questions on 13? Okay, page 14. I'll start with new equipment for $1,020. We had somewhere over $9,000, about $9,500 in that line previously. Much of that we reduced that is the technology for the library. We're also going to have a library warrant article. There was a nice presentation by our library media specialist to change some things in the library and change the library program. So instead of putting that in the budget, we've got a separate warrant article for a lot of those pieces. And I'll let Chris talk a little bit about that.
Sure, so we're looking at moving our library from a traditional library media program into more of what they call a library or a learning commons model. What that is it's really a nice way to say it. They're looking at the library media center as a fluid space. When you think of a K-8 school, the needs of a group of kindergarten students in a library and a group of 7th or 8th grade students in the library are vastly different. So in the library commons model, some of the hallmarks are flexible movement of furniture, flexible seating, flexible arrangements of tables, so that you can have kids spread things out and get right on the floor. Library media specialists are no longer sitting behind a desk and checking out books, and particularly in this world where you have STEM and STEAM, the operations of science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They're teaching a lot of those skills to the students. The library media specialist we have was actually a technology integration specialist in another district. And so we're actually very, very fortunate to have someone who has a library background, a technology background, and also a reading background. So she really wants to incorporate all of those skills into the library. So the warrant article will talk about for new furniture, which we haven't replaced in 20 years. That's the original furniture that's in there. When you think about how much furniture we have replaced in the classrooms over the years, the media center has not changed. So we want to put new furniture that allows us to have that flexible spaces within there. Also dedicated technology to the library. They all share carts and Chromebooks and pieces now. And a new piece of technology, the 3D printer. I say new, it's relatively new. You may have heard of those, and where students can actually program different things using CAD and whatnot, and actually have the 3D printer create them out of plastics. And, it's a process for us, but the Library Media Center has been an area that we have not really spent a lot of money developing. We've maintained it beautifully. But when we're thinking about creating programs that teach children not just what they have to do now to succeed in high school, but beyond, when we talk about technology in our one-to-one program, and Junior, I just said it the other day, we're educating children to solve problems that haven't even been invented yet. They're gonna get jobs that don't even exist yet. And so we need to create programs that teach thinking skills and problem solving in a collaborative way. That a library media center and a learning commons model is the best way to do it. This is something that we're seeing in some of the best schools across the country and in colleges and universities. So we just want to mimic it as much as possible, marry that to our public school model.
Mr. Trevette, what did Mrs. Lewis say was the symbol? She thought it might be the question mark?
Well, that was me. She
Oh, that was it?
she wasn't
Yes.
on board with it, but I thought, yeah, library, if the current Learning Commons had some sort of symbol, it would be. So students will go there not only to get their questions answered, but to generate questions as well. And it's a source of inquiry as well as solutions for your questions.
This was recommended last year by school administration, and through deliberation of the board, it was taken out of the budget last year before it got to the voters. So this is definitely the second round for this type of request.
It was a tough cut out of the budget, but the board decided to put it on a library warrant article, which we'll go over later, and there's some more pieces to it. Also on that page, replacement of furniture, you're not gonna see in this budget. That was removed, and we're gonna put that on the warrant article too. That's $12,000 out of this budget for the warrant article. And again, that's for movable furniture and flexible learning commons in the library as well. Also down at the bottom of that page, new equipment. We reduced that in the neighborhood of $14,400. And that was I believe the K3 iPad cart that was reduced from that, if you could speak to that.
Correct. Again, under computer-aided instruction, we're looking at moving forward with computers. And certainly we've been very fortunate to have all support around technology in our district. I mentioned, I think, the very first meeting, that technology education can no longer be something that's considered an addition to the plate, but it actually is the plate that students learn from. And so we take our technology very seriously in how we integrate it. It's done very deliberately. It's certainly not something that we just keep throwing equipment at people and say, have at it. We like to make sure that we're planning ahead and building a need. At the same time, we want to make sure that we're very cautious about how we jump. And while we're just starting to think about integrating tablet technology now, so iPads, particularly into the lower grades, we want to be cognizant of how we do that. And there's a time and a place. We're actually going to be using some grant funds this year to purchase an iPad cart. So we decided to take that out of the budget for this year, or for next year. It's maybe something you wind up seeing down the road, but we wanted to test the waters first and do a kind of a pilot program with the iPads before we put it in the budget.
So you still have in here the Chromebooks for all of sixth grade?
Correct.
Yeah, just a quick question. I'm excited about the direction you're going and you're bringing into the 21st century. But I meet so many young people who can't write. They can't take a pen and write. So I don't know if that's being stressed in the Nottingham school. I know it's not being stressed in the Epping school. Oh, I'm sorry. Scratch that. But I know a few students and they're graduates and they're having a hard time writing. You know, just using a pen and piece of paper because they're typing and thumbing all the time. So I don't know if that's a focus at all in our schools, but.
My students come home with penmanship
All right.
work, so.
That's a good answer.
It's striking a balance between technology, or let's just call it screen time, versus non-screen time is something we've been talking about quite a bit. It's a board level all the way down to the teachers in the classrooms. It's important that we have that balance. For instance, when we use our technology, the Chromebooks, it may not be that everybody at the same time is on a Chromebook. It may be that 2 or 3 students are surrounded by one Chromebook and they're talking. One person might be taking notes, but then they can share that with everybody else in the class at the push of a button. So we do make sure we try to balance some of those pieces. In our school, penmanship is taught straight through, and handwriting is still used all the way up to 8th grade for writing projects. They're still taking notes and writing things down. They're not always, even with the Chromebooks, taking notes on the Chromebook. We actually do offer cursive writing too in 3rd grade and 4th grade, just as a little piece. We do see that as something that we're moving away from as a community, as a country. But we still want to make sure we put some cursive writing still in the curriculum. But writing is still a strong part of what we do.
If we have a nationwide power outage and we don't have these computers, people are gonna have a hard time communicating.
Those thank you cards.
Yeah, as we come up with our new technology plan, that was something that we're considering as well. And it's the question of, although we know technology is going to be important in everyday use in the future, we also know that things like handwriting and those pieces engage a different part of the brain. And we need to get the whole brain engaged. And so it's like, how do we strike a balance to make sure that as we go into Google Classroom and the teachers are communicating with the students through computers, they're still live in the room. And we need to have that communication. We need to have the handwritten pieces as well. So that's something, we haven't exactly got the wording down at this point, but philosophically, all of the technology committee is pretty much on board that we have to make some sort of statement to that effect in our next plan.
This is the library section. Just a question regarding, since you removed that big chunk of technology there, was that 50,000 the original? Did that include your T1 or whatever, your internet pipeline that you were looking at?
No, that's in a separate category.
Right,
Separate,
right, a
okay.
couple lines above that, you see internet access.
It has 879%.
222556.
Oh, there it is, okay, yeah.
So the internet access, that would be in there.
Okay.
And guys, you did have some questions about that. At least one in particular about the incremental cost between bandwidth. I'm not sure who was curious if there's any specific questions around that, but right now we currently operate at 30 megabytes per second. And in our current structure with the one-to-ones in the 7th and 8th grade and the peripherals that we have in the building, every morning we pretty much hit 30 megabytes per second. It goes down a little bit once we're on, and people, when people all sign on at the same time, you hit that bandwidth, that height, and then it comes down a bit. In order for us to move and continue to add peripherals, we're gonna need to increase the bandwidth. There was a radio report and a news report that came out that talked about Nottingham School not being up to date to where it needs to be. That's not true. We have never had bandwidth issues, including when we test all of our students electronically with computers. So as much as that becomes great fodder for radio, it's not the case. However, when we continue to move forward to add peripherals and computers, we knew that we were going to need to. So actually, this was in our budget prior to all that hype. The idea that we could go to 50 megabytes per second and then on 100. Right now, we currently pay $100 a month for the 30 megabyte bandwidth. To go to 100 megabyte bandwidth, which was a recommendation, our minimum should be 51. The 100 megabytes is 1,400 per month, and that's through, yes, it's a substantial jump. 50 is 900 per month, so there's not like a small. We have reached out to some other vendors. We've gotten absolutely no promises and no guarantees to any of these new vendors saying, well, we're going to try and bring it down. The consistent ones that we've talked to are all in that ballpark. Currently, we're using Fairpoint, and that's their number, $1,300 to $1,400 a month. That's their commitment. So that's what we want to budget at. Hopefully, it'd be great if we can find something cheaper as we move into next year, as technology changes so quickly. But that's the guaranteed pool we have now that we could run. Fairpoint would come and run new fiber optics from the pole to the building at a very nominal cost. There already is, again, the 30 megabyte fiber already there.
And that could all change with net neutrality, right?
Just changed, that's right.
To finish off the computer lines, I'll go to page 15, and you'll see replacement of technology equipment. That has reduced from our original presentation of the budget. We've taken about $19,000 out of that for, I believe that was for laptop replacement.
I believe there are questions about the one-to-one for 7th, 8th grade and some of the benefits so far, as well as some of the benefits for the one-to-one for 6th grade. Folks are still interested in that?
Yeah.
I'm curious about the expansion of it to 6th grade and how much they're actually going to use during the day and that type of thing.
Yeah, so there were several technology questions asked, so I can start with that one. We can certainly touch on other ones as well. Specifically, one of the questions was around learning objectives and expected outcomes. We have to look at this in two different ways. There's classroom technology that's going to be used that's subject-based. How are they going to be utilizing technology in social studies, in ELA, in science and math? Those are rolled into the curriculum and the outcomes for social studies. What we wanted to look at is going to the one-to-one. Whether we had students had Chromebooks as they could, those subject matter objectives aren't going to change. What we're adding into the mix now is the one-to-one objectives. What are the learning objectives going to a one-to-one program? What are the benefits of that for students? Much like if you're at home and you give a student a Chromebook, that changes the responsibility of how they're going to use it. You have to make sure they're understanding what that tool is for and how to use it. Those are the objectives that we're talking about as we move to that one-to-one. Some of them are, I'm going to read some of them. To demonstrate an understanding of emerging classroom technologies. We want students to understand that this is a tool, what type of tool do you have, what type of peripherals can you plug into that tool to use. Also, the different knowledge, attitudes, and skills of the digital age and the learning environments. Our world is changing. We've seen it change constantly with technology. Students are no longer consumers of information, they're creators of information. How they fit in with that. This is we have students now in art class using these Chromebooks doing stop motion animation. These videos can be published. These are things that they're now creating and putting out there. They're creating their digital footprint. Learning how to use those tools is vital, and we want to teach them that now before somebody else makes a digital footprint for them. Some of the outcomes: plan, design, and assess effective digital presentation technology, learn curriculum and strategies that use technologies to maximize their learning, apply technology to a variety of assessment and evaluation strategies. Again, how can they look at something and have a more critical eye when it comes to researching? Boy, I think I'm interested in purchasing something. Well, let's take some time now to research that. And how can you use technology to aid you in understanding why is that good or why is that bad? What are the benefits and detractors from purchasing this or trying this or doing this or joining this? Understanding the social, ethical, and legal issues surrounding technology. You mentioned net neutrality. We want students to be aware of all those pieces because they're in that world. You know, in many ways, I don't think it's a term tossed around very much now, because, but they're net natives. You know, they're tech natives. We're the tech immigrants in a sense. They're brought up in this world, so it's vital for them to understand how to weave in and out of it. And it's our responsibility to make sure we teach them that. Having them have a tool in their hands all the time forces them and us to make sure they're understanding those concepts. If it's something that you revisit in a sterile atmosphere in the classroom and then put back on a shelf, that's a very different set of standards and responsibilities. Something that they're going to be using on a regular basis and have some ownership to, that in conjunction with something they might take home and with the parents, raises it to all of these type of objectives. And of course, to understand the new literacies that emerge with digital interactive learning environments. Does not, you know, and I think, I want to say that one again, understanding the new literacies that emerge with the digital interactive learning environments. That's a huge, huge piece. There's so many different things. You know, it's not just reading books anymore. It's not just surfing the internet and understanding, is this a good website or a bad website? These kids are on YouTube. So understanding that, what that is, they're publishing things. They're on, I mean, Facebook is passé. There's so many different social media pieces and different sites that they're part of. Understanding that those are literacies they need to understand. It's not just reading a book any longer in the classroom, and it's not just plugging in a computer and pulling up the internet. It's where you go from there.
And really, 6 through 8 in our school is a united curriculum. So we have the same science books, we have the same social studies and literature books. It's the same series throughout 6, 7, and 8. And if all of those have an online component, so the only paper books we have is one set of books in each classroom that the teachers use if they need to refer to it during class. And it's power books out.
It happens.
Pieces. But what textbooks do today versus what they did when we were all in school, it's a completely different creature. So just take a social studies book, for example. I was in social studies class, she was talking about the ancient Middle East, basically getting to how the conflicts all started, which could go on for a long time trying to figure that out. But the map skills, think about a map. People don't use paper maps anymore. I mean, somebody laughed at me because I had a paper map in the door of my car. And I'm like, what's that for? And I said, sometimes your GPS doesn't work. But we are used today already to a map that you can pinch, that you can expand, and when you expand, things you didn't see before appear on that map. That's what the textbooks of today are like. So the students are going into an atlas that's built into their social studies book. If they have a computer at their hands, they can actually zoom in, they can measure distances, they can superimpose maps on top of each other, the ancient world versus the current day, and they can see the differences. These are things we couldn't do with paper maps. But that's the kind of stuff they're doing with their textbooks. And so that's why it's kind of important that the 6th grade be part of the 6, 7, and 8 continuum, because our expectations are the same for them. It's the same for science. In science, you want to look at cells dividing. Well, whoa, you pop it right up, and everybody can see that at their own computer right at their own place. So it's kind of nice. I don't know how much more will go down below that, and it would be a different looking program. Anything lower, more like devices available probably to students. Whether they would take them home or not is in question. Even whether 6th graders would take them home is in question. That's some details we still need to work out about that. But in terms of the continuity of what a middle school looks like, it does make sense to us that 6, 7, and 8 should be pretty consistent in our expectations of the students.
How many computers are there in the sixth grade classrooms now for students to use?
We have portable carts, and they kind of have moved, now that 7 and 8 don't need them all the time because the students have their own computers. There are 2 of them that are housed within the sixth grade. That doesn't mean they belong to the sixth grade because they can be checked out by any teachers in the school. But for the most part, out of the 3 sixth grade classrooms, 2 of them have a cart that tends to live in their room, if you want to put it that way. So they're more accessible than not.
How many computers are on a cart? Is it one for?
There's enough for every student, there are 25.
Just a general question, do you find that the parents are having a hard time helping the kids with the homework, so they're looking to the schools to provide more tutoring, or is there a trend there, or?
We provide some tutoring and after school, as well as we have a couple of different programs for tutoring. I don't know if I see any different trends in that. I do know that we've had parents ask us for support. So for instance, on our website, and particularly in the curriculum, Judith's done a lot of work trying to put up websites and tutorials for parents and people to look at that they can reference. I certainly know with my own 2 kids, I look at their math and it's very different than when I taught math even years ago. So those little websites are handy. But yeah, so I wouldn't say we have a big instance of tutoring, but we've had some questions here and there sporadically that we've offered to help.
Just all the technology and devices and things that a lot of those parents aren't too good with.
Well, the beautiful part of technology is, my wife asked me to fix something at the house, and it's like, well, do you know how to fix it? So I may not know how to fix it, but I YouTube know how to fix it. Find a video.
Or so you think.
Oh, so I think, yes. And she has the HVAC speed dial.
Yeah.
So that really helps support a lot of learning too. And again, I think, the community has been very generous with technology, very supportive. You guys have been very supportive of how we move forward. Our school board has been, I want to say visionary in many ways, because putting that tech plan in place and jumping on it at a time where they have curriculum experts and whatnot too has really gelled well. But it's certainly not something that we want to rush into too. We want to make sure we're cognizant of the budget and the increase that we have. So we put it there for conversation. We want to make sure it's in the budget, that we can continue to talk about it. But I want you to know that we respect the process, and we understand that the percentages that we have to look at are required to make some tough decisions. This is just one of the directions we want to head in, and we see us going this for a couple of years. What that one-to-one might look like over the next few years varies grade to grade. And for reason why we want to pilot things like the iPads, because that may be the best tool for second and third grade versus a Chromebook.
I don't know the difference, but iPads, Chromebooks.
Anything else on page
I'll have some
15?
kid explain it to me.
There were some questions on software and other technology.
Sure, you might as well do it while we're here.
So one of the questions that came up was to discuss the technology expenses versus subscription fees and tech infrastructure. I wasn't quite sure if there were more specifics underneath that. It's a broad question, but I think some of the software that we use is subscription-based. Some of that is our curriculum-based software that teachers might use in the classroom, or such as Microsoft, such as spelling, Words Their Way, or things, whatever it might be that we use, Spelling City, and those we pay subscriptions to. Other ones that we use that are for the structure would be our AeroHive wireless hubs. There's a subscription to use them that we get a console, we get to control the hubs. Also, our Sophos antivirus is a subscription. Usually it may be a 1 to 3 year contract we get into with them, and some of the subscriptions are yearly based. So it makes more sense for us to do that, particularly if you think of the antivirus, because they keep updating as new viruses come out, and so we subscribe to that system. Same thing with the Air Hubs, the AeroHive hubs. We want to make sure that we're updating how our commuters communicate with each other as the latest technology grows. It's kind of like a new OS system. And in these environments, the new OS system comes up every few months. So as far as purchasing software, we do that as well, when it makes sense. And if you think of our Microsoft Office, we purchase Microsoft Office. We don't use it throughout the entire building. So in our case, instead of doing a subscription program like Office 265, or 365 rather, we just bought Office, I'm not sure, 2000, but one of the latest versions of it, and we have it on set computers. That made more sense to purchase as opposed to subscribe to.
And those trends seem pretty similar to what you see in industry, with more cloud-based and online things, or subscription-based, because that's really how those vendors make their money, plus they're updating things more often.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. It's easier to update one location than to update, 100 others.
Plus, you're not incurring cost after maintaining yourself, or you
Right.
have to support things that you've hosted locally, right? These things are in the cloud, and they keep them up for you, and you pay your subscription, things run smoothly, right?
Yep.
Supposedly, so.
We are in the process of gathering more data and feedback. One of the questions was around adapting, how to use adapting technology to the classroom.
Mhm.
And you heard one example, in social studies, and of course, science, it abounds as well in all the subjects. But we're still gathering feedback from the staff and students. The technology committee is formulating a larger plan as we build our new tech plan for the future. We're starting that process for the next 3 to 5 years. And we also have a survey out now to students and staff that's going to give us some feedback right away. When you consider we've only done this in September, it's early in the process, so we're trying to get as much feedback as we can, knowing that the feedback we get by the end of the year will be much richer because we have 8 or 9 months of the process as opposed to just 3 or 4. But some of the things that we've seen, staff have created several units, knowing that we were going to be going this direction. We had a lot of the work done over the last summer was around integrating technology into the classroom. So a lot of the, again, particularly the 7th and 8th grade teachers were here creating units of study that were based on Google Docs, which is where students can collaborate and share, or a lot of the Google apps for education, GAF, Google Maps. We use it for the internet research. We have websites like Grammarly where students are typing things in and using artificial intelligence to begin to grade, give them a preview, so they're bouncing ideas off of other folks before they even share within their peers. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback anecdotally from the staff and the students. It's become not only curricularized for them, but we see them using the computers at recess and at lunch occasionally as well. And one of the neatest things I've seen is taking notes. So you might have a group of students on one doc, and they're all there listening, but these 5 kids are on one piece of notes. So if I miss something, you caught it, we each get a copy of it.
Interesting.
I think that were all the technology questions.
All right. Anything else on 15? All right, moving on to page 16 is your school board services. We made some slight adjustments here. Contracted services attorney negotiator, bless you. We put that down to 23,000 to kind of get in line with some of our actuals the last few years. Community services outreach down toward the bottom. That was an idea of doing more community services projects. That was not utilized the last couple of years. But you can see there's nothing budgeted, so we decided to take that out as well. Again, looking for any place that we could pare this budget down a little bit. Anything else on 16?
So the dollar is just to hold the line item?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. On page 17, you'll see the SAU budget. That's an actual number now. That budget was set by the joint school board. I think that there was a question last time about how is the SAU budget developed. The joint board develops that budget. It has all of the members from all 3 communities, Northwood, Nottingham, and Stratford. So there's 15 members on the joint school board. They're the ones that meet to deliberate and set the preschool budget as well as the SAU budget. This year, the main addition to the SAU budget was we don't presently have any technology support. We contract that service out, and it's a great support, but it's inconsistent because it's not an employee of ours. So we put that in the budget for next year to actually have a part-time technology support person for the SAU. The process of developing the budget, when the joint board develops the budget, there's a public hearing before the budget is finalized for any public, much the same as you do in your district for your budget. The SAU joint board will have has a public hearing. people can come and look over and provide input into the preschool budget as well as the SAU budget. So that occurs, and then the joint board sets the budget after. Anything else on page 17? Moving on to page 18, actually it starts on 17, Office of the Principal. Moving into 18, the same, Office of the Principal. Some minor adjustments on that. There was a new equipment piece for $2,500 that was taken out of the budget. I believe that was the shredder. The shredder that we have is hanging in there, chewing away as we speak. So we, again, looking for any pennies that we can in the budget to help reduce it. That was decided to be taken out for this year. Anything on 18? Page 19 moves into your operation of the plant, maintenance director salary as well as corresponding benefits on page 19. Questions on 19?
You got a question about rubbish removal? The notes we had?
Oh, somebody brought that up.
One of the questions was whether or not we could use the town facility.
Right.
The challenge with that is we don't have a vehicle
Right.
that we transporting things, and then of course, if we do that, we would lose our dumpsters. Currently, we have 3. And so, you know, where would we store and do that as well? So it just seems a little inconceivable for us to be able to pull that off. I'm not sure there would be any cost.
Anything else on 19? On page 20, I'll take you to repairs and maintenance building. We have reduced that about $8,600 down to the $42,594. Part of that was the air conditioning for the library to, again, not only for the heat that is obviously in the library, but also for the conditioning the air for the books, and the carpeting that's in there and the other things. So that's taken out of this budget, and that's gonna be a piece of the warrant article of renovating and changing our library program. So you'll see that corresponding cost in the warrant article. Down the bottom of page 20, slight adjustment in supplies custodial, just back to reflect the adopted budget of this present year. Again, trying to find any slight reductions that we can, flat landing that line. Questions or comment on page 20? Okay. Page 21. I'll take you down to, start down at new equipment. There was a couple of water filling stations that we had planned on inserting and renovating in the building that we took out, and to leave them the existing fountains. A couple $1,000s there. New furniture, we reduced a nurse's desk, I believe it was, for $1,000 that we thought we could take care of as it generally stands right now, so that was removed from the budget. And also replacement of furniture, that was reduced a bit from the original budget we presented as well.
So this is probably a higher increase for the section that folks are used to seeing, but the building is continuing to age. It was built in 1995, it's about 22 years old. And there was quite a bit of deliberation back and forth on the board in terms of any other cuts to this area. Should these funds be spent more on academics? We also don't want, not that the building is crumbling down or anything like that, certainly we want to make sure we continue to invest in the plant and facilities, especially as it continues to age. I think also with a new maintenance director has come in with a different set of eyes. We're looking at things a little bit differently. Former maintenance director was excellent, but also just a different perspective and new things to focus on to ensure that the building is kept well up.
Yeah, I think one of the pushes of the cost that we do under the repairs and maintenance, we're replacing the glycol, which is the heating fluid in our heating elements, our furnaces, or the heat pumps that we have in the building. They're 20 years old. The ones are over the classroom wings. We want to make sure that we're maintaining them as best we can. This was highly recommended that we do in order to maintain the ones that we have. I think of changing the antifreeze in your car. That's what we're doing. And that's $16,000, so it's a good chunk of the increase.
Anything else on 21? On page 22, I'll start at the top under elementary school transportation. The transportation committee met, I think, at the beginning of this week, and reviewed some of the bids. So I'm gonna give you another number to put in, and again, this isn't a final number, but the school board is gonna be reviewing, and the transportation committee is gonna meet with the bus company on next Wednesday evening and hopefully finalize that contract. But just to give you a better number than is in here now, there is an increase to that line. So where it says $374,071, I'm gonna give you a new number to put in there. It's $421,200. So there's an increase in that line, obviously, of $47,129. And again, that's a more accurate number, but it's certainly not a final number until the school board has a chance to meet with the bus company on that contract.
Does that take into consideration the removal of the midday bus runs for full-day kindergarten, or are you budgeting for that just in case? Okay.
What you're gonna find is that in this particular budget, that accounts for the full-day kindergarten. When we go to the default budget, that's included, the midday run is included in the default budget.
Thank you.
Will you give me that number, sorry, will you give me that number one more time, please?
421,200.
Thank you.
Does this include the bus that is the pink bus that we're missing right now?
Yes.
The full 8.
Yes.
This would be if we were operating full, but they're
Correct.
giving us kind of a credit.
They haven't been charging us. They've been charging
Well,
us.
yeah, it's not for the extra gas.
It includes all of the buses, and obviously, if it's like this year and it's short, then we would get a credit like we are this year. Other questions on page 22? Bottom of 22, moving on to page 23, is your food service. No adjustments to report on page 23.
There was a question about food service supplies.
And we did reduce that.
Yeah, at one point in time it was 6,000, I'm not quite sure, but it's down to 3,000 as level funding the supplies and food service.
We also reduced the food and milk line.
And reduce that based on what?
Prior year actuals.
Oh, okay.
And the food service director was comfortable with that, correct?
I discussed it with the principal.
Yeah.
By delegation.
The food service director and I had a conversation about this. He's aware.
Thank you, Chris.
And, you know, he understands the numbers and where we're at. We're all tightening up a little bit to see every little bit counts.
All right,
No milk for you.
we'll go to page 24. I'll bring your attention to tuition, Dover, and other public schools. You'll see that we've got the existing number in there now. We did get notification from Dover, at least initially, that was going to go up 5.8% instead of the 4% that we budgeted. We didn't change this number. That's not something that the school board has discussed yet about that increase. So we left this number the same until a point in time that the school board has a time to discuss that.
And Bob, it's correct, true, that Dover will typically just give us an estimate until we're actually in the particular school year.
Correct.
So we will budget based on an estimate, and then the actual rate could come back differently, which actually it did last year. I mean, we spoke with him about that.
Okay.
So do we not have a cap under the Dover
There is a
contract?
cap, but it's not a cap that they have to adhere to in the contract. It's a suggested cap.
Basically the gist of the
So that's a
contract is. Basically what the gist of the contract is, there's a 4% cap on an increase, but the language says that if it exceeds that, the board could choose to reopen negotiations.
I don't remember, did it work in our favor last year?
Yes, the negotiations, yes.
It was,
Came down slightly.
it came down slightly?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought.
The cap is more like a visor, it doesn't really help.
Yeah.
4% is, if they go up above the 4%, we can go back to negotiations.
Correct.
So they're telling you already that it's gonna be 5.8.
That's what they're projecting.
The school board will talk about this next Wednesday.
Okay.
That's why we didn't change the number yet.
Yep.
And just kind of getting a feel for the 8th grade class, sounds like there's gonna be a lot of
Well, there's a different opportunity to Dover, obviously, next year, because they're opening quite a facility down there.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising my own household,
Yeah.
how things kind of turn. Sorry.
That's why we have two
Soon as that
two
video
good
came
schools to choose from,
That's right.
right?
So I guess I'll just
You know,
add.
I'll say it's the info night, it was two totally different worlds.
Right.
And, they did very well.
Mhm.
To that point, the transportation committee was concerned about the Dover buses that we send now are not full or close to full, but without knowing those enrollments.
Right.
Right now, there's 2 routes to Dover budgeted, the budget, or the bids included 2 routes to Dover and 2 routes to Co-Brown. And we were questioning because those Dover buses are half empty.
Right.
But we don't know yet what the enrollment will be. So.
I
Yeah.
believe that Dover students, potential Dover students have a longer time to commit than
Mhm.
Co-Brown. I think Co-Brown requires those by December holidays, but Dover could commit into the new year. So we could actually have our public hearing or deliberative session and still have some numbers shifting and
Right.
changing. I guess you would know who hasn't committed to Co-Brown, but then folks can certainly, sometimes they change their mind after that as well. Right. So it's fluid, right? It's very
We'll
fluid.
have a pretty good sense by the holidays, but it could change a few. Students change their mind at the last minute.
One of the issues with transportation, we do hear from time to time that, you know, that your buses aren't full. And we certainly go through this issue in all of our other communities. When you're in a rural community, it's not only the number of kids on the bus, but it's the length of travel that you have to do. So, you know, there are some buses that aren't filled to capacity, but we don't want the kids on the bus for an hour and a half, hour and 3/4 either each way. So, you know, that's a balancing act that the Transportation Committee takes on every year as well.
I think it's
Yeah.
somewhat compounded because we don't have a school, a high school in our community. So they're traveling even outside of our community, depending where you might live, that distance increases, depending where you live and which high school you're going to.
The bid from Dale also charges more for the Dover routes than they do for the others because it's farther.
Correct.
Oh, it's 23 miles.
So not only are we paying for a half-empty bus, but we're paying more for, more for a half-empty.
Can I just ask why the Co-Brown tuition is so much higher than Dover? I mean, are the teachers' salaries higher there, or, I mean, it's quite a discrepancy.
I think that part of that is that one is a complete public entity. Dover is a complete public entity, and Co-Brown is a public academy. So they're run by a board of governors. So their money comes all from tuition, where there is some adequacy money and other monies that go. So it is plus the size of the school as well enters into that as well. I mean, much the same as we see some fluctuations throughout the state and in the different communities and the different size schools. You know, there is a slight difference there.
And what's the state average per student? Do you know?
Oh, it varies depending on level. I would say that at the high school level, the state average is probably, and I'm guessing off the top of my head, probably in the 15,000 range.
The ADM for this year?
No, for the cost per,
Per
the
pupil
tuition.
cost. I didn't
I
put it
would
with me.
say it would be about 15,000, give or take.
We can get that information
just
to the
emailed it
committee.
out.
Curious. 'Cause I heard it was like 12,500 at a meeting I was at, you know, a month or so ago, so.
Well, that might be a K through 8, that could be a K through 8 average.
See, again, there's a difference
Or
between a tuition
elementary.
amount and a per pupil amount as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
They calculate an elementary amount, a middle school amount, a high school amount, and they average that together for them. So, it's a lot
Okay,
of
maybe that's where I get the number from.
And, you know, remember when you're talking about student costs, like, let's take Waterville Valley with 60 kids. Their per student cost is upwards of $20-something thousand because of the scaling. And so when Co-Brown has 700 kids, and Dover has more than that, as long as they don't have to add teachers and have the course offerings, it's gonna be a lower per student cost.
Yeah.
It's a marginal.
I went to UMass, it was 1,800 a semester. Of course, that was a few years ago, but obviously education costs have gone way up.
So staying on that Co-Brown line, that's actually increased slightly from last time. Again, your tuition lines are going to be, we're going to get those accurate right up until the last time you see the budget. So if we have students that move out or students that move in, we'll adjust it accordingly. So there's gonna be slight fluctuations each time we present this. At the bottom of that page, tuition anticipated move-ins, we reduced that 31,753. We had homeschool students that we had budgeted for in the 8th grade that we would anticipate that they would come to the 9th grade. We've made the phone calls and had 2 of those students say that they're not going to be attending last year, so we took that out of your budget. Now, realize that's our best guess. They still could choose at any point in time to come, and we'd be responsible for that. But we made the phone calls and tried to get at least an idea whether they're gonna be attending or not, so we took that out. Any other questions on
Yeah.
24?
Jackie, did Susan indicate to you that there was a question last week about getting a historical average of the move-ins that
I
occurred?
believe I saw that one.
Okay.
But I can add that, I'll get that on the list.
Well, yeah, Susan was aware that we've asked for that, and I was just wondering if there's any movement on
I
that.
did look into it, it was at the office.
Okay.
It only had 3 years back, I wanted more.
So it looks like we have
Sorry.
3 years of information, but we want to get more? Okay.
Thank you.
I had one more question too. In the middle of the page, there's a total elementary school cost, but it looks like it's just picking up the food service total from above. Was that supposed to be the general fund plus the food service? I wasn't sure how that was, or maybe I'm just not thinking of it right.
Still, Jenna, you on page 24 still?
Yeah, 24, in the middle of the total elementary school cost row.
Oh, yeah.
Looks like it's just the food service from above, but I thought the way I was interpreting it should be the general fund plus that food service.
You are correct. Up above it says total general fund.
Yeah.
8.4, so that should actually be your total elementary costs. We'll fix that. Thank you.
Sure.
I think one thing too, talking about our high school education, we do have larger classes moving through the upper grades that are replacing smaller classes that are currently in high school. And given that we are a tuition-based community, we send our children to high school, for each additional student is going to cost anywhere from, $13,000 to $16,000. So, 10 additional students, not even people moving into our community, just that we have some fluctuations in larger grades coming through. So something we definitely need to think about, because that's certainly what's increasing the default budget and our overall budget costs. And it's just a matter of our population and how the ebbs and flows are flowing.
To that point, if you look back at that where it says total general fund, you'll see that the total elementary school cost is up 2.61. If you put in the collective bargaining agreement, if you put in the transportation, you can see that there's not much else increased in the elementary school.
Really, it's the addition of those 2 regular education paraprofessionals to get full-day kindergarten.
Right.
Was really the main focus for the elementary school budget this year. For Mr. Souza.
Yeah, there's not a lot more.
It's pretty much, when we went through it, that was really the main initiative, given,
All agreed?
yeah.
Yep. On page 25, we'll start with the high school special education. You see down at special education tuition Co-Brown. That is an accurate number, so I don't have any adjustments on that page. Any questions? On page 26, I'll take you to high school transportation. Again, these are numbers that we need to, I'll give you new numbers for these 2 areas. Again, this is the transportation contract that the board's gonna talk about Wednesday night. So high school transportation Dover, the new number is 130,500. So $130,500. And then high school transportation, Co-Brown, 105,300, $105,300. And again, those are our close estimates right now as per the bid proposal that came in, and we'll finalize those as the school board has a chance to discuss those. So with that, if you look down a little bit further, total high school cost, obviously, we've got to add those transportation costs that we just put in there. So you're looking at, it was 9.89, so you're looking at right around a 10% increase for your high school with the transportation cost, and like Jackie said, the number of students that we have moving in, which is a kind of a bubble fluctuation that goes through as well. So the bottom line number now, with these changes that we made to this budget and the transportation that we put in, you'll see 12,636,000 there. I'm going to give you a new number to put there. The new number is 12,725,686. That's 12,725,686. So that's the present number, and that ends up with the total budget of 5.69 increase.
6%.
5.69%, yes. Questions or anything to add?
So that 700,000, 500,000 has to do with Co-Brown? Did I get that right?
What does that have to do with high school populations and high school busing?
Like I saw on a page earlier, Co-Brown was going up by $500,000.
Well, because of number of students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when the taxpayers look at this saying, why are we going up 700,000? Co-Brown would be a big part of that answer.
I would say that the number of students where tuitioning is going up. That would be the correct answer.
But I do think it is a good educational opportunity. We're going to have to explain that really carefully to the voters in the community, because you look at it and you see a 25% increase, but there's a lot more to the story than that. There's more overall students. There's 25 more students anticipated Co-Brown than last year's budget. One thing too that people, we probably need to remind people about, for the past 2 years, we did have in our contract for year one a 3% discount on tuition, and then for the second year 2.5%. But in year 3, which we're in year 3 of the contract, we go back to the regular rates. So we did achieve savings for the prior 2 years, but now because we were paying 2.5% less than the regular rate, that increase looks even greater, but we did achieve savings in the prior 2 years as well. So I definitely think we have an educational challenge, or opportunity with the community members to have them understand what that increase is about. It's not, Co-Brown did not go up by 25%. There's a lot of factors there. There's more kids, the discount has ended. There's more overall students, so. But I think your questions are very, I think a lot of folks in the community will have the same type of questions.
Yeah, the simple questions,
Yeah.
simple people. But just try to figure it out.
They're good questions. They're very fair, good questions.
Well, some of them.
How are you doing this year to date versus budget on your expenses?
That was handed out to you all, and right now we have $378,000 left in unexpended funds. It's early for us right now because we're only 4 or 5 months really into the year. We only started in the end of August, and right now you're talking middle of December. What I start doing in February is I start taking a look at where we're going to be at the end of the year, and instead of doing encumbrances, I actually add a column that says what I'm anticipating those lines to be. Because until we have something in place, I'm unable to encumber with a purchase order or with a salary line. So then we try to gauge that where we're going to be at the end of the year.
So in terms of projecting on a month-to-month basis, do you do your budget month to month? So that you budget how much you expect to spend on each of these categories every month?
We try to, but there's certain things like enrollment with Co-Brown. I can't update that because we get 4 different invoices through the year, and then we do have the enrollment, but because sometimes that number does fluctuate. We also have the Alt Ed program, which is at the SAU, so sometimes.
Sure. So there's some challenges.
Correct.
So, but if I were to ask you year-to-date budget versus actual, You couldn't say we're at 100%, we're at 75%, we're at 125%. Could you tell me that?
I couldn't tell you that right now. I could probably get you a closer range probably in January or February.
Okay, so that's not something that's ongoing you keep track of?
Right.
Okay. Because in looking at this, I mean, obviously, and again, I'm new to the game in terms of what your expenses are and what you've been going through. But if you look at actuals, and then you look at adopted budget, and then you look at proposed budget versus actuals, those are some pretty substantial jumps. And I think it's a realistic question to ask, well, you really thought you were going to have increases in your adopted budget. Is that coming true, or is that not coming true? And if it's not coming true, then why are we yet increasing the budget again when we're not even spending our budget year-to-date on this budget? And so for me, that's a fairly important question to know the answer to. Just a comment.
I think part of the challenge is that we're oftentimes predicting what's gonna happen 18 months out. So we're taking our best educated guess. Some of the contracts are easy. I mean, if we're budgeting for teachers' contracts or something like that, it's real easy to get that very close.
Right.
But if we're predicting, you know, something like electricity or some of those things, yes, we're going off of history and then our best educated guess as to what the percentage increase might be. So,
No, and I totally get that.
I understand what you're saying, but we're trying to get it as tight as we can and still be responsible in making sure that we cover all our expenses 18 months out.
Okay, but you know, say at the 6-month mark, it's realistic, to me, it's realistic to say, you know where you are. Yes, you did have to predict this some time ago, and for anyone to expect it to be 100.00 would be totally unreasonable. But you do have more information now,
Right.
and you would think that that would be reflected in next year's budget thinking.
Right, we try to tighten the financials up. I mean, like Marjorie said, as we get to September, October, November, I mean, we've got a lot of lines fully encumbered that we know we're not gonna spend, but we need to encumber those to get a good snapshot. As we get into the January, February timeframe, that's where we start releasing some of those encumbrances, get some of our special ed building and other buildings in, and start tightening up that actual number. We try to predict that end number as soon as we can.
Sure.
So if there's a revised proposed budget total, is there a new default budget total?
The default budget that we passed out to you tonight actually is revised to have the transportation already in it. It doesn't have the Dover tuition number in because we haven't discussed that yet, but the default budget does have that in it presently. And you'll see on page, let's see, 12 out of 13 of the default budget, you'll see that it's at a 5.19% increase.
And that does include the 3 midday bus runs for half-day kindergarten, because if your proposed budget does not pass, you will have to go on your default budget, which means there is no full-day kindergarten. So we have to account for those buses.
Marjorie, what estimate did you put in for the midday runs?
Is it $90 a day?
12,000.
It was $90 a day per bus.
Yep. So it was $16,200 per bus. And right now you're paying about 12,000 something per bus.
So about 4,800? And how much were the 2 paraprofessionals? 40? So actually, it's cheaper to have the teachers teach full day than to bus the kids.
Well, ultimately,
I know the voters decide,
Yeah.
but that might be a good educational opportunity as well for us.
well,
Right.
ultimately, again, you're on a bottom line budget. So the school board does a bottom line budget. So if the default goes through, I suppose that the school board could have a discussion about implementing the full day kindergarten and trading it off with not doing that midday bus run. Because again, you're doing a bottom line budget.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's not that you're adding more staff, or, I mean, the paras, but I mean, it's the same 2 teachers, same amount of time, same classroom space. You're just shifting how they're using their time.
Yeah, that would need to be a discussion that the board would have to have. But in developing the default budget, this is how we need to put that in.
And that's actually better than what we've seen in the other districts when we've done this, is because, luckily for Nottingham, you do have 2 teachers that teach 2 half-day classes themselves. The other schools, they only have 1. So at that point, we needed to
Add a
add
position.
a position for a teacher and a position for a para.
The space.
And I did want to correct you, it's $40,000 for the para salary, but it does not include benefits.
Okay, so it's
So, yeah,
not as cut and dry, but very close.
yes,
It's in the ball.
just to be clear.
Would you like us to quickly go over the warrant articles just over here?
Yep.
I handed those out in the packet tonight, there's some revisions in there. As far as the warrant article goes, Article 2 obviously would be the budget and the default budget, however that ends up. Article 3 is the building repair capital reserve. You can see there's $86,000 in there. The school board had pretty lengthy discussion about this the other night in wanting to make sure that there's enough in that capital reserve account in case there's an emergency. Oftentimes in building capital reserves, you're talking about big ticket items, roofs, boilers, those types of things that cost a substantial amount of money. That's why you'll see the $50,000 in that one.
That's also to align with the CIP plan, the capital improvement plan, the source of funding. And there were some members of the board that thought perhaps even raising this to 75,000 in future years could be good, but we thought 25 to 50, see, and then perhaps go up. But definitely, given the age of the building, there's quite a few things on that CIP plan that over the years will need to be addressed.
Article 4 is the grounds improvement capital reserve. And that has $28,000 into it, and it's a $15,000 warrant article. Article 5 is the textbook capital reserve. Again, this is an attempt to not have spikes and valleys in your budget as you do a complete textbook implementation. So that has $40,000 in it, and we've got a $20,000 warrant article there. Jude, is there anything else you want to say about the textbook capital reserve?
No, basically the 2 most expensive curriculums that we replaced would be math and reading, and the ELA. And the ELA we just replaced 2 years ago. So the next one coming up 2 years from now is the math curriculum. So we would have the money in place for that without having added as a line item for that one-time expense.
Was there kindergarten textbooks or something? There was a line item in the budget? No?
Materials, they don't have textbooks.
Okay.
Yeah, we added some in.
Article 6 is the improvements to the library program. As I went through the budget, I identified 3 or 4 different areas: technology, air conditioning, furniture, some different things that were included in that to adjust our library program, and that's $30,000. And Article 7 is the world language program. I believe that includes the teacher as well as some textbooks for $86,440.
If that were to pass, what would you do about space issues for the world language?
Excellent question. So at this point in time, there are several scenarios that the administrative team has discussed as to what world language would look like, and we're going to be talking about that at one of the upcoming board meetings to have an opinion, and whether it be K-8 or 6-8 or how it would be rolled out. Regardless of how it's rolled out, the teacher would be on a cart and would travel classroom to classroom.
We don't know what language yet.
We haven't nailed one down, but the conversations at the board level have been around Spanish, French, the most popular languages that we say.
Universal Sign Language, my personal favorite.
I could make a CD, sure.
Yeah, I mean, we got a sign language teacher in there, that would make it, you know, again, I think that would be helpful. Up to the hearing impaired as well.
Article 5, you're missing fund balance. It says fund balance. Next to June 30th, 2018, unassigned fund balance.
I love it.
It's a fund balance.
We should all be for that.
Totally agree with you,
What's the problem?
It also says not additional amount instead of no additional amount.
Oh,
That same one.
Yep. Yep. Must have been late in the day on that one.
Should the same no additional amount raised from taxation be in Article 4 too, because that's also coming from fund balance?
Oh, as far as the verbiage, yeah.
Yeah, we can make sure those all get cleaned up and. And Article 6 and 7 are different, right? They're raising and appropriating,
Yeah.
they're not from available fund balance.
Right. Any other questions?
I still have to put in a plug for the whole solar energy, renewable energy thing in the schools and conservation. It seems to me that should be an integral part of the educational experience in this day and age with the whole climate crisis thing. So it seems our school's missing a big opportunity there. I'm sorry, that's not exactly a budget question, but it's a big gap.
I can actually give you a response to that because I attended the solar energy presentations for the town on behalf of the school. And really the issue is that roof is going to need to be replaced in the near future. So
The new school?
For the school, there's a roof replacement. When is that in your SIP, Chris? Your,
The latter years?
It's not a new school anymore.
right.
Well, it is to us in the woods. Still a new school.
So the-
Still remember the tax increases.
So you got a roof replacement coming in 6, 7, 8 years. And so it didn't seem totally feasible to put a solar array on the roof of the school.
Actually, they build roofing with solar into it,
Yep,
solar
they do
shingles,
now.
solar
They do now.
roofs, so
You're absolutely correct.
be part of that, yeah.
So
It'll be
Yeah, it should
cheaper
be-
in 6 years too.
that's certainly something for the administration to consider.
I mean, how many of our students go home and turn lights off when they leave a room? Is that even in the discussion? I don't know, just a thought.
I think we can add to future discussions of solar. I know you brought it up the last time as well. Mrs. Levinson raised some points about current contracts and buyback on some of the work that was done, maybe with some analysis of.
Yeah, we had energy efficient lighting put in years ago, and we've got a contract that runs a number of years to pay that off, and I know that, that may actually run off the same time. We're talking about 6 or 7 years to the roof, so that might line up pretty well.
All right. Anybody have any other questions? Thank you very much for all that intricate detail. Appreciate it. So, it's a lot to chew and a big number, but we will hopefully take some time to review it on our own and come up with some more questions and then see how the numbers progress. So, thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
If there are any specific questions that come up, if you could please send us an
Yep.
email. That way we can be prepared to answer them again.
Absolutely.
That'd be
Yeah,
great.
definitely give you the time to put the answers together and gather the
That'd be
information,
great.
whatever that
Thank
may
you.
be. So, the next step was basically just general school updates. And Sue sent me a quick email and I don't know if you guys want to add to it, but basically, some of the questions that had come up from last time was that the state report has come in, so the state has released the final scores relating to the Smarter Balanced Assessments that was taken by students in grades 3 through 8 in May, with the final scores ranking, and the following data came from digger.com or something. So, oh, okay, schooldigger.com, yeah. The school ranked 55th out of 229 elementary schools, and that's up 16 places from last year. The middle school grades ranked 5th out of 124 schools in the state, up 26 places from last year. And then the school district ranked 24th out of 153 school districts in the state, and that is up 21 places from last year, so kudos to,
That's results.
and then the rest of the information she gave me was regarding transportation and Dover tuition and so on, so we covered all of that. The last one that was on here was that there is proposed legislation from the New Hampshire Senate that will potentially decrease funding to public schools, and that you might have some answers to that, or that you're following it anyway, not that you have answers.
I believe Scott's got some information on that.
Oh, Scott's got that. Sorry.
A little plug, you're going to have a community forum, I think, on January 11th in Deerfield.
Okay.
I just sort of forward that flyer to Chairman Snow to forward to the budget committee.
That would be great.
Senate Bill 193 has to do with the education savings plan. It was cleared the House and cleared the Senate, and is now being studied by House Finance because there's a potential tax impact. Each hire in New Hampshire has done an analysis. That analysis basically says that 1% of your population accesses the education savings plan to pay for private school, that will potentially increase your taxes by 4 cents per thousand, and then up to 5% could potentially affect your tax rate by 21 cents per thousand. So just good things to keep your eyes on, and maybe a good forum to go to in Deerfield on the 11th. And we'll watch how that progresses through House Finance.
When is this supposed to be, when are they looking to vote on this?
They've already voted, it's passed the
Oh,
House.
so it's
and Senate,
pa-
but
okay.
because there's such a potential impact tax-wise, it gets to get studied by the House Finance. So, they're doing that this week, I believe. Today, Wednesday?
Thursday.
There you go, right, I think they started. Put it on for the snow, from the day, so, something to keep your eye on. And there's some articles in the Concord Monitor that you want to access. Retired New Hampshire, if you hit Retired New Hampshire, they'll give you a pretty comprehensive website. And then there's probably some analysis that says something different, so it's a good thing to
Yeah.
study.
I can certainly send along things that I, as a school board member, I received to the committee if you're interested. Send resources.
Okay. Great. Think you very much. You're free to go if you'd like to, or you can hang out and enjoy all the other minutes that we're going through.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your time, I appreciate it.
Questions, thank you. Right. Oh my God, right? I'll hunt you down.
I think our students are in good hands.
I'll take 3, just in case I miscounted.
What's that?
Thank you, Jude.
Can you put these in my book for me? You seem to have a deck.
I put them in your book for you.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
The tabs pretty much match the title. So this is your proposed budget. First set of materials.
I already have one.
Yeah, and I would just put it in front because that's the,
Man.
and I'll give you version.
Yeah, when our fourth graders hit high school, it's It's gonna be like, there's a big.
Keep the two separate. Warrant articles, okay, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I might just stay, because Susan
Oh.
wanted to be here.
All right.
I was a kid when they told me I'd
So,
fill this thing out, they weren't.
The next item is the general town updates. Unfortunately, Tony told us last week that he was not going to be here and that somebody would be stepping in for him, and that did not happen. So we will forego the general town updates this week. And we can go right into the minutes of December 7th, 2017. If you want to take some time to read through those and make corrections as needed. Bless you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any changes, corrections, additions? They need to be added?
I do.
Yep.
Yeah. Page 2, line 51, or 51, where Mr. Keister asked if the solar purchase had been discussed with the CIP. Mr. Sterndale stated at that time that he would verify the purchase price, that it was, and that he would verify. Actually, during that meeting, I believe he did verify and indicated that it was discussed with the CIP.
It's later in the minutes. It's on.
Is that it? I
Yeah,
missed that.
so
Sorry.
that,
Yeah.
I don't know what line it's on, but
Okay.
it is in nursing.
Thank you.
Was it 103?
No.
103.
Okay, cool.
Back on page 1, line 24, it says the town is currently at an approximate 105,000 higher than the 2017 budget. I think you mean the proposed budget is higher,
Yes.
not that the town's actuals are higher.
I just had line 44 on page 2, just adding A, it says there's currently video surveillance and the changes will be made in a way to balance the town.
Give me that line when you're finished.
Line 44. Changes will be made in a way to balance the small town feel while keeping steps.
Yep.
And that's it.
Keep it down to the wire.
On line, page 4, line 158, there's, now maybe it's an artifact that just happened to be on my page that isn't really there, but it appears that the semicolon after system,
Where?
line 158,
Moving into the school system. Oh, it is a
should be a comma. But maybe it is, and mine just has an extra little spot on the page.
Oh, we're gonna get into comedy
Eye on
debates.
that one.
Give me a little slack.
Do I have a motion to accept the minutes of December 7th, 2017 as amended?
Please accept the minutes. December 7th.
All in favor?
Aye.
One thing.
Yeah, I wasn't at the meeting, so.
All right. Do we have any other business that anybody wants to bring up, address?
Well, I did have a discussion with Mr. Sterndale about the asbestos situation,
Okay.
and he said it would cost too much to remove, but he didn't have any numbers. Said the town doesn't need the space. There are too many higher priorities, and it's best just to leave it be.
For now. Okay. Thank you for that. Anything else anybody has? No? So then, round table, anything that you want to discuss outside of that?
Good meeting, thanks for all the information. I like having the notes on there.
The notes are extremely helpful, yeah. Extremely helpful for keeping track. So, and I like the summary page of where the deductions,
Yeah, that was
additions,
nice.
changes
I was
were
able to go
made,
back.
so that you can refer back and forth. I think the only part that confused me going through it was some of the line items. Obviously, when you take it out and it becomes a zero item, the line disappears. So then when you're looking at the reference numbers and you're trying to reference back, it's just not there. So that was the only thing that kind of confused me. But other than that, it was very good, so appreciate that.
I guess I'll just add too that for the transportation bids, there were two, and Dale was by far the cheaper of the two, and they're gonna come to the school board meeting next Wednesday, so if people have specific questions for Dale, I'm hoping one of the things that they'll help us understand is there's a pretty dramatic increase in what we pay now over, what they're proposing for next year, and just understanding where those additional costs are going. So is it driver salaries, is it gas, is it buses, you know?
Additional
Hopefully they'll
routes
give
or
us more
whatever.
information about that.
Yeah.
But if you have other questions,
And that's when?
Our way or Jackie's way.
When's that meeting?
It'll be
Wednesday.
6:30, but since the negotiation session, it will be done in non-public because we're negotiating a contract.
Right,
So
okay,
we've invited the transportation committee to join us, and the board will be there as well.
okay.
And certainly no votes or anything will be taken in non-public, and then we can then present, afterwards.
right.
But, because it's negotiation and a contract, it can happen in non-public like that.
Sure. Great. Did you have something, Michael?
I did. I just wanted to mention that I thought it was very responsible that the SAU and school board administration did as much cutting of the budget as they did. I think it's a challenging year with the number of students moving into high school, that it just kind of hits a budget pretty hard no matter what. But I thought that was a really good, responsible reaction to that reality, and I appreciate that. The other part of that is that I just did a quick calculation that says the default budget and the operating budget proposal are about $60,000 apart, which isn't a lot. And if we as committee members think that this is a good budget that should be approved by the voters, when we talk to people about, how they could save $60,000, or maybe even less if that transportation item in the default budget also needs to be adjusted, that would make that $60,000 go away essentially. But a lot of times when I've had conversations with townspeople, and we talk about, well, if we didn't approve the operating budget, then we get the default budget, which is just about the same hit on the tax impact. Tell them that, yes, that may be true, but it also precludes moving forward with the initiatives that the school is trying to promote and needs to promote. And so it's really a wise choice to go ahead and push for the operating budget, vote for the operating budget instead.
Thank you.
Good point.
You mentioned the number of students going into high school this coming year. It makes me think to the fourth grade class and the large population in there. And we're gonna see that in just a few years. I mean,
We
that's
have the
gonna be-
enrollments, they go up every year for the next, based on the current enrollments, it goes up every year for the next 4
Yeah,
years.
The fourth grade
That
budget
fourth
is
grade
a
class
bubble.
is,
Yeah.
It's huge.
is a big bubble there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
gonna be interesting.
Worthy of a capital reserve fund.
Then there's a big drop, so after that.
And then it kind of goes back down.
Yeah.
But it's just, we're kind
That
of
means-
slowly building up to that. And I don't know, it's just something to kind of put out there that it's coming.
Other towns do have tuition capital reserve accounts. Northwood does. I think last year they were hit with at least a dozen move-ins, or maybe even 2 dozen, quite a few. Like, it was substantial one year.
So could we establish a warrant article where we start putting in the equivalent of like 1 student every year until we reach that? What was it, last year you guys wanted 6? Find that right number.
Could certainly be a discussion. I think in the
And then
past we've done more the line item move-ins, which I know there's definitely a subject that Michael's interested to have the facts and the data on that, but that's another option, is to put into a capital reserve and not have that budget. Again, the voters have to vote on it. It's
Right.
based on available fund balance too, so if you ever had a year that was, tighter like that, it might not be available. The order that the warrant articles have the available fund balance allocated, but certainly good ideas.
Yeah, if we could actually do the math on that fourth grade class
Right,
and get an understanding of when that's gonna hit the high school,
right.
make some adjustments so that we save for that, essentially.
Right, we can prepare
So
for it,
it's
so it's
spike.
not such a big factor.
Fifth grade class is only 2 lower.
I was gonna say, it's an incremental, so it's not really,
here, unfortunately, 61 in 8th grade, 65 in 7th grade, 63 in 6th grade, 69 in 5th, 71 in 4th, compared to definitely lower numbers, and
What's 3rd grade?
51, it drops 20.
yeah, 51, and then 51 in
74 to 51?
71 to 51.
71.
Wow.
That's a classroom difference.
Mhm.
It is, yeah. And I remember it was all like a month just before third grade was starting, last year.
There were a lot of right? There were move-ins in lower grades recently.
Right.
You know, I'm sorry for my, still needing to learn the language, but what's the basis for the default budget? How is that created and why is it default?
Okay. You want to take it?
Sure. I have a paper on that.
No, you've got a white paper.
There is a white paper.
I do
on
have a
that.
white paper on that. I will share that with you. But essentially, the default budget is, it's designed to be a level funding of the prior year.
Okay.
Okay. And there are differences that have to be in that level funding to accommodate the contractual obligations.
Mm-hmm.
You can't level fund because it's already been contracted in that you will incur these expenses. But then there's also things like the one-time purchases. If there was a one-time purchase last year, that would not be considered part of the default budget because you wouldn't be making that same purchase this next budget year.
Okay.
So those are the two big,
So it's a
Drivers
force, kind of a force fit to be the same as last year? Is that?
So, yeah, so they
level
take,
funding with the-
yeah, you're taking last year's budget and then they.
this year's budget, actually.
Or this year, yeah.
Right.
And then adjusting it according to the contracts that are set in place that you're required to pay because
Right.
you've already made those commitments. And then removing the one-time items, like you were saying, that you're not gonna incur again this year, and that creates your default budget.
And you have to work with what's discretionary and get that to a level where
Right,
it's.
and that's why they were saying
well-
too, is if we go to a default budget, that cancels out the full-day kindergarten, so then you're going back
Thank
to, the midday bus routes and things like that, so you have to include those costs into the
Gotcha.
actual budget.
So, Les, the primary differences between the school budget and the town budget isn't just the calendar or fiscal year.
Mhm.
It's the fact that the school is an SB2, and that has its own different set of budgeting rules than the town, which is on regular town meeting. So when you review this budget, you've got different timelines that we have to meet as far as holding your public hearing, when the budgets must be posted, because you're voting on that budget, not at town meeting by a vote of raised hands, but on the ballot.
Okay.
So the budget committee has a public hearing, you present a final budget to the public. The school board then holds their own deliberative session, which is kind of a town meeting, just dedicated to the school items. That's the last time that any potential changes could be made to the budget. And then once that budget goes through the deliberative session, those two final numbers are then the numbers that are put on the ballot.
Okay, wow, all right, thank you.
Michael, did your document list the RSA? I'm sure it did.
It did, yeah. Thanks.
Can I just ask a general question or simple observation is I'm very supportive of the budget process here, and I've been very impressed with the school representatives. But it looks like we're going up over $2 million over 3 years. So, and it looks like it's a total of about 20%. So I think some people in the town will wonder, why our schools are going up 6-7% a year versus, the inflation rate.
Can I keep it?
1 or 2%. I mean, I understand the Code Brown's a big part of that, but there's a lot of other.
It's not just Cole Brown, though, it's Dover also. I mean, Dover just said that it's a 5.4 increase potentially.
And that's not even in here yet at that level, right? It was in
But
at
I mean, it's in there
4%.
for 4%, so you can't just blame it on Cole Brown.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that, not defending one or the other, but they're equally responsible. I mean, Dover's building a whole new high school that we're gonna be paying for in some fashion. So you can't keep pointing towards Cole Brown as the essential cost of what's going on here. I mean, there's bits and pieces on each page that's kind of in this whole thing. So if you're gonna point at Cole Brown for their 4%, we got Dover on there for too.
Don't get me wrong, I like Cole Brown, it's a fine school, and Dover too.
And
But they're going up $550,000 this year, and I mean, anybody look at the budget will see
But you're
that.
looking
And
at
that's
the number of
numbers.
students that are going there,
Right.
and that number's not actually final.
So is our total number of students have grown that much over the last 3
And
years?
that's what we were just discussing, about the enrollment numbers continually increasing. I mean, and you kind of see that peak hit what's gonna be the current fourth grade class. So I mean, every year these numbers are going up because of the number of students.
If you look at the number of seniors on those lines, it says the number of seniors and then the estimated incoming freshmen, we're up 14 students between the two high schools.
Right.
So 14 times.
Times $16,000 or
Yeah,
whatever the
15,000,
average
call
is.
it in the middle, yeah.
Misha, might I add something too? I think this goes back to Les's point too. So typically at the end of each fiscal year, the school does have a fund balance available because of the budgeting and because of the cost. I think, as Dr. Domsky said, we're budgeting, 6 to 18 months out. Some of the student services costs are hard to anticipate with special education. Your tuition numbers can be difficult to also, sometimes the insurance comes in differently. One year they said it would be a 7% increase, it came in at a 3% increase. So typically the school returns quite a bit of money back to the town, which goes directly to offset the tax rate. So in the last years, for FY 2014, we returned $573,000, and then $398,000 and change in 15, $489 in 16, and $340,000 in 2017. Now, some folks would say, yes, you should try to budget tighter as well, and folks certainly try to, but also make sure that there's enough budget to cover the services, because you could have a special education student or have someone's needs changed, and
That's an out-of-district
an
placement.
extra placement, you could be talking $70,000, $80,000 or so, and you're trying to budget this, 6 to 18 months out. And, children's needs, their needs change, they move in and out of district, so it's definitely, it's a different animal. But I can know, some folks say, well, that's quite a bit, to have returning to the town. But in the percentage of the actual budget, it's only 3.5% up, perhaps, of a $12 million budget. It seems like a lot of money, but when you're looking at a $12 million budget, it's not a bad percentage. It'd be nice if it could be tighter, but we still don't get too tight and not be able to pay for our children's education.
What happens if you go over budget in a given year?
You have to go to the DRA and have a special emergency meeting. But we also, a couple years ago, there was a new statute where, before this statute came into place, the school could not put any money aside except in their capital reserve accounts, but now we could have a special kind of emergency fund that had to be voted in by the town. It was up to 2.5% of your net assessment, so basically the current amount that needs to be raised by taxation for the town. So 2 years ago, the town voted to allow, we wanted only 1.5% of that, and so we put $60,000 into that and have not added to it since. So if we really ran into an emergency spending situation, we could first, I think, have to go to that funding and then talk to the state about it. That's a situation we definitely want to avoid.
Right.
Because before that, there really wasn't a way for the school to retain any fund balance unless it was in capital reserve accounts, which are very purposeful and specific. They can be for grounds or building or textbooks or high school tuition, as some communities do. Special education, we do have a special education reserve account, which we opted not to add to this year because we're at the level that Mr. Bruning believes is sufficient.
Do you think that there's any other warrant articles potentially coming, or are we pretty much?
I believe that should be the full set unless the board changes direction at the next meeting, but those are all the ones we had discussed. There's already quite a good list. I probably don't add more to it. Get voter fatigue as they're voting on the warrant articles.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Do I have a motion? Oh, no, one more thing. Yes, I have one more thing. Since Suzanne has left us, we need a volunteer for the CIP committee. She was the one that was going to those meetings and was going to present. I think there's a CIP committee meeting coming up in a week or so.
I think it's
I forget.
Thursday. I believe it's Thursday. We're
It's
looking
Thursday?
Either Monday or Thursday, and most folks said Thursday was better.
I know there's one coming up soon, so if anybody wants to volunteer for that and report back to us, that would be great.
Do we have a budget
We
meeting
do.
next Thursday?
Yeah.
We have a budget committee
Back to
meeting
back.
next Thursday, so
Next time too.
Another one?
I have to, I don't know when the CIP meeting is, but if somebody can attend.
Next Thursday, it's gonna be last week, they helped me do the same thing, and at 5:30, and then they ended at 6:30. 6:30?
I've been working till
Yes.
8 o'clock every night. I apologize. This is the worst time. I'm gonna pass on that.
It's a nice committee.
It sounds fantastic. This is, my family hasn't seen me in days, so.
A few weeks ago, did I happen to mention that I would stand in for an absent and any kind of event where the CIP committee member couldn't be there? Did I do that?
Did you mention that?
Could be.
Yes.
I think I did.
You did, absolutely.
I think you just said it higher, so that was actually.
Thank you for jogging my memory. No,
I think
perfect.
I've already volunteered.
That would be
Unless
great.
somebody else wants it, that's fine.
No, that would be great. So,
Thank you, Michael.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and we got some great information tonight. Thank you all for your great questions, and
Are we looking for somebody to replace Sue? Are we advertising?
yes.
And she's only, just for the rest of this
I
term.
think she was a one-year term, right?
I don't know, but it doesn't matter, her replacement would be through March.
Through March anyway, right,
Yeah.
between now and, yeah, so. But, all right.
Start networking with people.
But the neighbors,
Gotta
but
rope 'em in. Lasso 'em.
Yep.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? You second that? All in favor?
Who was that motion? Sorry.
Carol?
Second?
I'll take it.